Welcome back to the Money Bear Podcast. This is your host, Chloe Daniels, better known as Chloe Bear Money Coach on the internet. And I'm really excited about today's episode because it's listener write-ins again. We went to the Instagram stories at Chloe Bear Money Coach and asked you guys, first, do you talk to your partner about money? Do you talk to the person that you're dating about money? And if you do, what is the biggest obstacle that you face? And if you don't, what is your reason for not talking to your partner about money? And then, of course, we also just put up a question box for any questions that folks would like answered on this podcast episode. So I'm really excited to dive in. Now, in the future, I think it'd be fun to bring my boyfriend on to also respond to these. He and I think we're pretty good at communication. There are times when we're not, and there are times when we have to say time out. This isn't going anywhere. Let's try this again another time. But generally, we always are able to get to the point where we can really communicate the other person's needs and the other person can listen without getting defensive and can open their mind up to whatever it is they were trying to say. So I want to do that eventually. Probably not yet. Maybe in a few months, but for now, you guys just get me. Now, full disclosure, I am historically single. So you're going to be getting opinions from somebody who is wildly independent, probably too independent at times, who has been through a lot in the dating market, who has been engaged. I've been through far too many bad relationships and a couple of abusive relationships. So that's kind of the perspective that you will be getting is someone who knows a lot about money, someone who has helped a lot of couples and individuals with their money, and someone who has not had a permanent relationship. So that's what you're getting. I think most of you already know that about me, but if you don't, that's your sign to take this information and my advice. I'm using like air quotes, my advice on these situations. I mean, essentially what you're getting is my opinion, but that's what you guys wanted because you put it in the question box. So that's what we're going to dive into. All right. Now, first, I want to talk about how many people said yes, they talk to their partner about money. It was like over 90%. It was a little under 10% of people who were like, no, we don't talk about it. And we'll talk about some of those reasons in a little bit. But I was impressed with the number of people who were like, yeah, of course we talk about money. Of course, that's a conversation that we have. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are out there having conversations. Now, we're going to talk about some of the issues you are facing in those conversations as well. But I wanted to give some perspective of the thousands of people who voted. Most of you are having conversations. So that's the first step. And I want to applaud all of you for doing that. Now, when I asked if you are having those conversations, what's your biggest obstacles? Some of the obstacles that you guys brought to me were I'm a saver, I want to pay off debt, he could care less, there's no issues. We talk about investing and comparing different ETFs and stocks. Well done, Danny B. Some said that certain things we view under the categories of wants versus needs. Another person said we need more money. Another one said, we come from different cultures, countries. There's an understanding that things are different, but I don't think you truly understand until you're really experiencing it. Another woman said that my husband is fine having credit card debt, but it hurts my soul. And we've got a lot of that of it's like, differing opinions where people are just kind of reaching this point where they're like, we just have different opinions on what we need to do with our money, different priorities between saving and spending. One's a planner, one is not. Some of them are money people, some of them are not money people. And it looks like a lot of folks are experiencing that same thing. What I thought was interesting is I had a few people also say that, like, my husband thinks that investing in the stock market is stupid and retirement is a luxury and you're going to, have to work until you die. And as much as I would love to address each one of these individually, that would be probably like a 3-hour long podcast. So what I'm going to try and do is answer the ones that seem to come up the most often. So Let's get to the actual listener questions. Now, those were the answers of people who are like, what are the biggest obstacles that we are facing when it comes to talking about our money? And then for folks who said that, I am not having these conversations with my husband, those answers were pretty similar. It was like, for the same reasons that you're having the biggest obstacles when you are having those conversations with your partner, pretty much the same things were said for folks who were talking about, like, oh no, I don't have these conversations with my partner, and here is why. The only other like addition that I would say to those obstacles that we've already talked about is that we don't live together, we don't make large purchases together, we're not sure when the right time is to bring up talking about money. I feel like we're so busy and it's best not to fight about it, so we don't talk about it. And some folks also said, like, we don't talk about it anymore, we have talked the F out of it, the fuck out of it. And some people have also just said, like, not sure how to start the conversation. So we're going to address a lot of that, but let's go ahead and dive in because I think this is going to be a very interesting episode. Okay. So the number one question that I got when talking about couples and monies and couples and monies, lots of plurals, is what are some ways that you can split expenses with your partner when you have children? Now, there are so many different ways to do it when it comes to splitting expenses and managing your money with your partner. I don't love the 50-50 approach. Now, the 50-50 approach is essentially looking at what is our each of our income and splitting all of the expenses that you have right down the middle. Even if one partner makes significantly more money, and even if one partner is, saving for retirement or put the down payment on the home or whatever it is, it's just this even 50-50 split of all of your expenses. I'm not a huge fan of that because of exactly what I mentioned and what I kind of alluded to is like, what if one partner is making significantly more money? Why should they have to essentially stretch themselves, potentially putting them in a bad situation in order to meet the lifestyle standard of the person that is earning more money? I get it. That is a taboo topic. I get the desire to immediately go into, 50-50 because it seems so easy. And I also understand that the higher earner may not be willing to lower their standard of living in order to make sure that the person who's making significantly less can also enjoy the same standard of living that they're living. And that gets complicated. So, this is kind of what I think. Again, take it with a grain of salt. But I think that expenses, once you live together, once you start cohabitating, once you start procreating together, they should be split in proportion to your incomes. So, if somebody is making 50%, 70%, 80%, 90%, or more than the other partner, whether that's male or female, I think that person should be taking on the lion's share of the bills because in a relationship, at least in an ideal relationship in my brain, if I am willing to be with someone or if I want to be with somebody, if I want that person in my life, I never want to put them in a bad financial situation in order for them to meet my standard of living. I would be willing to either continue my standard of living while paying for the lion's share of it because I make more money, or I would also be willing to have a slightly lower standard of living or be willing to compromise on certain things, whether that's like the neighborhood we live in or the amount of money that we're spending on rent, so that my partner doesn't feel like they're being stretched financially just to be with me. That to me is a lot more equitable in ensuring like, yeah, if I want to maintain this level of living, if I want to continue having this level of living, then I'm going to do that, but I'm going to have to take on the extra expenses that are involved with that. If I'm not willing to do that, then I'm either going to have to compromise and have a lower standard of living than what I was expecting, or maybe this person isn't the right person for me. If money is so important and your standard of living is so important, you have to be willing to pay for it or you have to be willing to let go of that person. Because putting somebody in, I've seen stories on Reddit where like somebody who is particularly wealthy is dating a teacher and wants the teacher to be able to go on this family vacation to Paris, but she can't afford it. So, in order to afford it, she's like skipping breakfast and she's skipping meals. She's only having one meal a day, and he can literally hear her stomach growling. But instead of offering to pay more, which he easily can do, he just lets her suffer in silence. He lets her do that. To me, that's so cruel. That's not something I would ever want to do to my partner. If my partner could not afford a trip I wanted to go on, I would either go by myself, offer to pay for them, or I mean, honestly, those are the two things. I would either go by myself or offer to pay for them or help them, if I wanted them to be there. And full disclosure, my boyfriend and I, we make very different incomes. I make significantly more than he does. And we have had that conversation. I have said to him, like, there's a part of me that does not want to lower my standard of living in order to be with you. Like, I don't want to do that. And I know that's something I need to work on because I do want to be with you. However, that does mean that sometimes I'm going to have to make the decision between paying for you to do something with me because I want you to come along, but I know you can't afford it, or doing it by myself. And having that conversation with him, he's like, I'm totally okay with that. So I think it's really important to be able to have that conversation, which is good because a lot of you are showing that you are having these conversations. Um, but personally, I think that's the fairest way to do it, is to look at the incomes and split expenses according to your incomes. Now, what I will say is that is from the perspective of somebody who does not have children, who is not cohabitating with somebody. I have cohabitated with folks before, and we did that as well. It was really focusing. Actually, no, in the past, I think what I did was 50-50, and that didn't really work very well because of exactly what we're talking about, different standards of living and different experiences. But when it comes to children, I know it gets a lot more complicated. I think that becomes a little bit easier when you're focusing on, what is the actual proportion of income that you have versus like our expenses. How much are you actually able to do without, bankrupting yourself? Obviously, when you're married with children, you've got to be focusing on how do we provide for these kids. I have seen people comment about that and talk about that. In fact, one of my friends, her name is Allie, and she's at Financial Intentions. She had commented on one of our Reddit episodes where we were talking about the husband who had wanted his wife, who had just given birth, to pay the full amount of her quote luxury epidural. It was 8 grand, and they had split everything 50-50. Like, that was how they that's how they had managed their finances for the last 14 years, I think it was. But he said that was her expense. That was something she decided she needed, and he shouldn't be responsible for her needing a luxury epidural. Obviously, guys, I don't think epidurals are luxury, and I think that guy's a twat, but that was what he said. So anyway, my friend Allie had commented and said, this is what gets complicated when you're trying to split things 50-50 in a relationship when you have kids, because it's never 50-50. Like, the emotional labor, the amount of labor that you put in physically, the amount of time that a woman has to take off from work, those sort of things, those are not 50-50. That's not 50-50. There's going to be an imbalance of labor, especially when you've got a newborn. Sure, later on in life, eventually you'll get to the place where maybe you'll achieve close to 50-50, but that's why it's such an issue to just assume like, oh, we're just going to split everything 50-50. So I think that when you get children, the conversation is really looking at, how do we provide for our children and what kind of standard of living do we want for our children? And then looking at our incomes and looking at how can we achieve that together. So, but yes, a blanket 50-50, I don't think is the answer. Do I think you need to price out emotional labor and the labor that a woman has to go through in order to have children? I think that's a nuanced conversation. I do not disagree with the idea of, essentially providing a stipend for one partner to provide a stipend for the other partner, or to cover the bills while the other partner is taking a break from work in order to raise their children, or in order to, and during the maternity leave, if there's a part of unpaid maternity leave. But it does get complicated and complex, and I think every couple is different. But at the very least, I think that there should be a conversation about it, and what kind of life do you want for your kids? And based off of the kind of life you want to give them, what needs to happen with how you guys split bills? What I will add to that is I really do think that even if couples decide to completely combine their finances, that it is always important to have a stash of your own money somewhere else. So I really like the approach of having one joint account for all your joint bills and then having separate accounts for personal money. You together decide how much goes into that joint account, and then everything else you can keep in your own separate savings so that you get to decide and get to maintain that autonomy. You don't have to constantly ask about big purchases or things like that. Like, you both agree that whatever is in those personal accounts, you get to use. That gets to be your money, your play money, or your investing money, or whatever it is that you want to do with. Again, that all starts with that clear communication of what do you guys want? How do you see yourselves managing money moving forward? And through that, the reason that I am really passionate about that is because financial abuse exists. It exists. And we don't want to put ourselves in a very vulnerable position by completely combining our finances. And I get it. That doesn't mean that you don't love the person by having a stash of your own, especially when it's an open conversation and it's not like a secretive stash. But to be able to have access to funds in the event of an emergency or in the event that a divorce happens or things get nasty, it can be life-saving. So I always emphasize that at the very least, you're going to want to have your own account with some of your own savings just to protect yourself, just to make sure that if something were ever to happen, you are covered. So that's kind of my 2 cents. But yeah, generally, I like the approach of this is how much money you make, this is how much money I make, these are our expenses. Based off of the income, this is how much you're going to put in, and this is how much I'm going to put in. Rarely do I think that really makes sense as a 50-50 split. So that's the first question. See, guys, I told you this is going to be like a 3-hour long podcast because just that question took almost 18 minutes to answer. Well, no, we had an intro, so it took at least 10 minutes though. Okay. Now, the next question is one that came up a lot was, as a woman, how do I help my male partner get more financially savvy? So, this, and I think this applies whether you are a woman trying to get your partner who is a male or a female going in terms of excited about your finance. I think it works as a man trying to get your male or female or transgender or whatever partner on board with your finances. So I have talked about this before in the podcast, on Instagram, in blog posts and things like that. But I think the most important thing when talking about finances with your partner is to have a conversation first about your dreams. So often, one partner in the relationship is incredibly excited about finances. They like numbers, they're excited about the future. Maybe they discovered the FIRE community and they are so pumped at this idea of early retirement, or they just see so clearly the importance of saving for retirement that they run to their partner and they're like, oh my God, look at this really cool spreadsheet that I put together that will show us when we're able to, retire someday. And then they show all these numbers, they show the tactics behind how they think they're going to, achieve this. And they'll make some wild suggestion like, let's live off of one income, or let's live off of 50% of our take home pay. And the other partner is just going to feel like, holy shit, I just got completely bulldozed. And now I'm scared and I feel stupid because I don't, number one, understand what they're talking about. And number two, that sounds scary. That's not necessarily something I want to do, because how does one even live off of 50% of their income? How does one only live off of one income? How do as a couple do that? So it's kind of like the excited one who sees the vision has seen the vision without ever bringing their partner on board. And so they go in, they bulldoze them, and then they're upset when their partner is like, yeah, no, I'm not interested. So the reason that happens so often is because we've never been taught how to have these conversations around money. And when you are a numbers person, or you take the, I don't know if it's the red or the blue pill, but you take the pill and you're like, your eyes are unveiled and you're suddenly awake to the possibilities of what money can do for your life in a very real way, to the point where you may be able to stop working. You may be able to buy that second property, whatever it is. The passion you feel, it's like, I just need to get you to the point where you want to be excited about money. The way you do that is not by bulldozing them with your plan, with how you think you guys should be doing things. What you need to do is have a conversation about your dreams. You've got to go to your partner and be like, hey, set up a freaking date, set up a time, make it sexy, make it something that you can both look forward to so that your partner doesn't associate it with numbers and spreadsheets and budget templates. You've got to talk about how you see your life together. What is your dream if money wasn't an issue? How would you spend your time? What would you do together? What would you no longer do together? What are the things you wouldn't worry about anymore? What are the things that you would embrace? Get really deep on your dreams before you ever talk about how to achieve those dreams. Because here's the thing, no matter what you want to do, whether it's getting to stay on a farmstead, whether it's living off the land, whether it's quitting your jobs and traveling the world for years, whether it's sending your children to college, whether it is buying a second home, whatever it is, you have to have money. We live in the United States. We live in a world, and even if you're not in the United States, we live in a world where in order to do anything, it requires money. Even getting your mental health right requires money. And so, whatever that dream is that you get very clear on, like, I want you to spend an hour talking about this. Whatever that clear dream is, you've got to get so clear that it's so sexy and so exciting. And then you start talking about, like, believe it or not, I think we can actually achieve this. And here's a few things I think we can do to start making our way toward this dream life that we want for ourselves. So you can't go in just expecting your partner to be on board with a dream that you created yourself. You've got to be able to talk about what your dream is together. Because if you're not bringing them in, how are they supposed to be excited? How is debt freedom exciting if you don't see the way your life will be different? How is living on one income exciting if you don't see the reason why? You, the money nerd who's coming to the table excited about this stuff, you already know that. You've already fallen into some kind of rabbit hole. You found Instagram where people are talking about finance. You found FinTalk, whatever it is. You started binging podcasts. You've already seen the vision. Now you have to go back to when you were in their shoes, when maybe you were overwhelmed with money, when maybe you thought you could never do this, when maybe you believed that you were bad with money, and you have to meet them where they are, and you got to bring them into the conversation. I don't want my partner to tell me how my life is going to be if he has not even asked me what I want. So you gotta have that conversation. And we have blog posts about questions to ask. So head over to clobare.com, CLOBARE.com. There's blog posts about how to talk to your partner about money. I believe we had one specifically that came out over the holidays, and those questions apply. So it was questions to go over at the end of the year. We probably need to do a new one, but they're the same questions. What are the things that you want together? What is your dream life together? How do you see things being when money's no longer an issue? So that is what I would say. How do you get your partner on board? You get them excited about the potential life you guys could have together. You understand what their dreams are. And remember, a lot of you are going to face somebody not being able to dream, somebody who has not opened themselves up to the possibility of dreaming that far, to the possibility of thinking beyond the struggle, beyond the credit card debt, beyond the, poverty that they may have grown up with. You're going to have to show them what dreaming is. You're going to have to kind of nudge them in that direction. And if you get to the point where you cannot nudge them in that direction, then maybe it's talking to a counselor. Maybe it's getting some therapy together, but you've got to bring them into that conversation because this is a dream you're building together. If you guys aren't clear on that dream, how on earth are you going to get there? What steps are you even going to take? So I hope that helps. I know that's not a tactic of like, well, first you put them on a budget. First you deplete their savings. No, I'm just kidding. It's more getting to the why of things. I guess it is a tactic, but I hope that helps. I think Chrissy was the person who asked that, but a lot of people asked the same question. All right. The next question on this list is, how would a single mom get back into dating again after 6 years? I love that you asked this question, even though the call for questions was specifically about money questions. But I love this because I obviously have a lot of experience with online dating. I am not a single mom, but what I will say is that dating apps are awful. If you can avoid them, that would be great, but it depends on how much time you have. So, my favorite dating app, though, because if you don't have time, dating apps are going to be the best route for you. But my favorite dating app was Hinge. I always had good luck on Hinge. That is where I met my current boyfriend. That is where I've met a lot of my past boyfriends. That's been great. The other thing I would recommend doing is something that my friend Saya Hillman actually, she and I talked about that on our podcast episode together. And she was just like, when I got to the point where I was tired of the dating apps or I knew I couldn't be a dating app person, I started going to things that I wanted to go to, like for the pure desire to enjoy it. So I would go have a meetup. I would go host a meetup. I would do things in my town just because I was interested in doing it. So that if I went into that thing with the expectation of just enjoying that experience, I wasn't going to be disappointed if I left and hadn't met anyone. So I love that advice. That was something that I had planned on doing once I got back into the dating game. However, then I got back with my boyfriend. And I just think that's a beautiful piece of advice because it no longer becomes this heavy, arduous thing where it takes work and it's, using an app and like not showing up as yourself or having to like always go under these pretenses of dating. You got to go to things just to experience the thing. And then the potential byproduct is meeting somebody. But if you go with the intention of just enjoying yourself, of having a good time, of learning a new skill, whatever it is, and then that happens by proxy because you happen to be there, that's pretty great. So that's if you have the time. I know as a single mom, it depends on how old your children are and how much time you have and how many resources you have. If you do not have those kinds of resources where you're like, Chloe, I cannot go to volunteer at the dog shelter, 4 times a month, then maybe the answer is a dating app. So, like I said, I really liked Hinge. OkCupid was okay. I did like that OkCupid you could put more information is in to make sure that you were like really getting some good results, but the only time that I have found somebody and dated them on a dating app was in my early youth days of using Tinder as a dating app and Hinge. I don't think I've ever dated anybody off of Bumble. I've never dated anybody off of really any other app. So that was my favorite. But I will say it also depends on the city that you're in. Some cities use Hinge, some cities don't. So don't be afraid to try out a couple of them. Most people are on multiple dating apps. So good luck out there. Good luck. Open your heart up to love. It's out there. There are so many people out there. Yeah, hot single mom. That's some men's dream. Assuming you're going after a man. If it's not, it's some women's dream. For sure. Haven't you seen Zoe? God, what's her name? She's a huge TikToker and she's always looking for the sexy older mom. Sexy single mom. So anyway, I hope that helps. Mari, I don't know how to say your name. I can only see your handle. So I hope that helps. Okay, we've got a couple more. Like I said, you guys, this is gonna be long. We have tons more. I'm just trying to pick the ones that I saw the most often. So this one's big. What do you do when lifestyle divergence develops between partners because someone started making a lot more? Marissa, what a hard problem. A good problem in some ways because who doesn't love making more money? But a hard problem because it does change or can, at the very least, change the dynamics between you and your partner, especially if there was a power dynamic, or if that was one of the things that drew you guys in together or made you think they were more sexy or something along those lines. I'm not trying to imply that's what made them sexy. So it's just word vomit, but it can change the dynamic and hopefully it doesn't. But when that happens, especially if it's because of change in aspirations or a change in ambition or in ambition, you've got to ask yourself, what is important to me? Why am I with this person? Am I with this person because they compliment me, we have similar goals, I love them, and we are compatible in a lot of ways? Then does the divergence in your lifestyle or the divergence in your incomes, does it really matter? Going back to our earlier conversation about how do couples split expenses? What is the thing that makes the most sense? I do believe, and now granted, this depends. I don't believe that if you are in the early stages of dating and you're still getting to know each other, that suddenly you should take on all of the extra expenses for making more money. I do think that in the beginning, there is more of that 50-50 split, unless the person who makes significantly more money wants to treat this person when they see potential and they want to like invest into this person. What I think you have to ask yourself, depending on where you're at in the relationship, is are you okay with either lowering your standard of living in order to make sure that the person that you are with is able to enjoy all of the same things that you are enjoying, that you are doing? Or are you not okay with that and you want to be able to find somebody who can go do these things with you, who can, get that new place that you wanted to get, go on that trip that you wanted to get, and not have to worry about money? That's what you got to find out. Or is the third option, the third answer, are you okay with doing some of that stuff by yourself? That's the compromise, right? Or are you okay with paying for them? So I think that's what you have to ask yourself. It's okay if the answer is no. It is okay if you're like, I am not willing to lower my standard of living in order to bring this person along with me. That's okay. It is okay if you're like, yeah, I am willing to lower my standard of living in order to, be able to do more things with this person or to be able to have like give them the same opportunities and adventures that I get to do for myself. And it's also okay to say, hey, some of these things I'm just going to do by myself because I'm not willing to give this up, but I'm also not willing up to give this relationship. I want you to be here. I want you to be part in my life, but I also want to honor the fact that this is stuff I want to do and I've freaking earned it. So, what matters is being able to really communicate what it is you want, but you have to figure out what do you want first. When I was in the throes of dating and getting really clear on what I wanted, that was one of the things I had to ask myself was what type of life do I want with this person who I will be with? And for me, I absolutely do want somebody who can hold their own, who can, add both financially to our lives as well as adventure to our lives as well as, being able to keep up essentially, keep up in air quotes. Whether it's being able to go somewhere else. And I originally thought that I wanted like a digital nomad, somebody who could travel as much as me. But I think when you actually meet the person or know the person or you're with the person and things change, that's when you have to ask yourself, am I okay with that? Do I still want to opt into this relationship? And if you do, great, there's nothing wrong with that. But figuring out what you really want is the key here. So, what I ended up understanding and figuring out is so, had I not reconnected with my ex, I really believed that I wanted to date another business owner. I wanted somebody whose level of ambition matched mine. I wanted somebody who was adventurous as I am and who was, willing to, or I guess not willing to, but just money driven, the same way that I am, success driven. But what I have realized is that I need someone who compliments me more than somebody who competes with me. I love the competition. I love the desire to be better all of the time. And like that's something that does fuel me. But what I really need is different than what like I find sexy and exciting. What I need is to be reminded that I'm a human. What I need is for somebody to love me regardless of if I'm achieving or if I'm not achieving. What I need is for somebody to remind me that it's okay to spend the day doing nothing. And that's what Tarek is for me. He is very different in terms of the things that he is drawn to and what motivates him. And that's good for me. So you got to ask yourself, what is it? What is the thing you want? What's the thing that you really want and really need? Sometimes the thing you want and the thing you need can be different though. So I hope that helps. I think I'm trying to think if I sometimes I hate it when like I feel like I didn't answer the question or when somebody doesn't answer the question, but I think that does. I think that answers the question because there's not like a tactical thing you do. It's an internal, it's a looking inside of yourself and figuring out what do you really want? What is the life you want? And if the answer is I want to be able to spend as much money as I want, do what I want when I want, and I want my partner to be able to do that too without having to rely on me to pay for it, that's okay. But you got to ask yourself, is that what you want? Or is it something else? So I hope that helps. Okay, what other question? I think we have time for a couple of more. Now, I wanted to answer this one, but I think I have to pull up my phone because I can't read it. It's smaller text because this person uploaded a photo. I think we've kind of addressed this, but this question comes up so much, I don't think it hurts to address it again. Jackie asked, my partner and I have been together for almost 4 years and have a joint checking account for shared bills that we both contribute to out of our personal accounts. If we were to get married, I have no idea how to go about doing more combined finances than that. I've never had a good example of a couple handling finances. Do we have one joint savings? Do I consider his retirement when planning, or do I just focus on my own? Jackie, the good and bad news is that it's up to you. Every person has a different way of handling it. They have a different way of thinking about it. They've got different approaches. The way I see myself personally handling my finances if I were to ever get married is what I had kind of mentioned earlier. Having our own personal accounts, whether a checking and a savings personal account, and then having a joint account for bills that we both decide on being the thing. Like we decide together how much we are each going to put into that account. Then you also have to have that conversation of what is our retirement going to look like? Do we want to make sure the other person is going to be able to retire at the same time? I think that becomes the bigger issue when one makes significantly more money than the other person. In the instance of my own relationship, I know that Tarek would never want me to take that on. However, I will always make sure I am prepared for that if that ever became an issue because I'm a psycho and because I really like having a lot of money. Or it's not that that's not the best way to say it, but I like security. And so for me, even though I fully trust Tarek to save for his own retirement, and I know he is because I've helped him set it up, I would always make sure there was enough for both of us, like in any situation. And if we were to get married, and I would also sign a prenup that made sure that if we were to ever get divorced, he would also be covered because I care about him, because I love him, because I want him to be okay. But that's a decision I'm okay with making. However, if it was like somebody who made just as much money as I did, um, that's a good question. I mean, it's so different person to person because personalities are different, your goals are different, your trust levels with the person are going to be different. I mean, in an ideal world, we're all with somebody who we trust 100% and, they never betray us and there's no reason to not trust them, but that's not reality, right? So I think a lot of the times we have to prepare for the worst. We have to make sure we're doing the thing that protects ourselves while also doing what we need to do to show love and support to our partner in a way that makes sense for us. And that can look like funding somebody's retirement. For example, if one of you in the relationship is a stay at home parent in that situation, I think it is absolutely a requirement that the spouse who is bringing in an income make sure that the stay at home parent has an IRA that they are funding. Like the spouse can fund a spousal IRA for that stay at home partner, even if that partner is not making a dime. That to me is a requirement. It is also the stay at home parents, or I mean, the income earning parents' responsibility to make sure that spouse has an income. Raising your children is a job and it deserves to have a paycheck. And however you guys decide to do that, there should never be a situation where the stay at home parent does not have access to their own money. So, whether that's you guys deciding to completely combine your finances or whether that's deciding like here's a fair amount that we think that you should get as a stipend or as the stay-at-home parent so that you can feel this autonomy and you can also save it, you can invest it, you can decide what to do with it. That is a conversation that needs to happen and it has to be equitable. It has to be something that makes sense for both of you. So whether or not you save for that person's retirement, I think in an ideal situation, both partners are saving for retirement. Both partners are making sure that the other one is covered. And then you get to decide to what extent is the other person responsible for the other person. That is going to vary person to person and couple to couple. You, like I just said, in my own relationship, our conversation that I have had with Tarek is, he would never want to stop. He would never want to stop working, even though I could easily make him a stay at home dog dad. But that's not him. That's not something that he wants. And, I've even said, in order for you to leave your job so that you can come join me in Arizona, I could support us for a few months while you figure out a job. That even makes him uncomfortable. So I think you've got to figure out what is comfortable for both of you and be able to have those conversations. And, it all begins with communication, and communication is really hard. So that's why things like couples counseling is so important. If these conversations do constantly turn into arguments or constantly turn into yelling matches and things along those lines, because if you don't have the ability to communicate, you're never going to be able to get to a place where you have a system that actually works for you financially. So again, I apologize. I mean, you guys know when it comes to personal finance, it's personal. Every single person is going to do something differently. I have my own opinions on stuff, but like I said, in my own situation, I will always make sure that as long as he and I are in a relationship, that he's going to be covered. If I have the funds to support him, or if I have the funds to cover an emergency or something like that, obviously it's my decision, but I would never let my partner get into a bad financial situation because I love them. So, again, it's not your responsibility necessarily, but you got to ask yourself, what am I willing to do for this partner? And what you're willing to do for your partner, it might be telling. It might be telling in terms of your commitment to the relationship in varying levels. So, I hope that helps. I hope that helps. It's so interesting having this conversation with myself because it's like I don't ever want to say something that's going to hurt someone's feelings. I don't want to like sway someone into like breaking up with their partner, or I don't want somebody to feel bad unless they deserve to feel bad. But there is so much gray area when it comes to personal finances with couples. And I think the really important thing is communication and making sure that you're taking care of each other. That's a partnership. Like when you're married or when you're in a partnership, when you're in a long term, and granted, in an early relationship, and we'll talk about some early relationship questions here shortly, but in an early relationship, things are going to be different. In a long term relationship where you're planning a life with a person, whether you're married or not, isn't the goal to want to take care of each other? Like for the most part, to see the other person thrive, to be able to build a beautiful life together where you both feel supportive and safe and cozy. And if that isn't the goal, it's okay. It's okay if that's not your goal. If you're like, yeah, of course I want him to feel cozy and comfortable, but I'm not going to fund it. That's okay if that's your approach to your relationship. But I do think in an ideal situation, isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we're looking for? Is support on both sides? At least in my view, I think that is. You guys can let me know if I'm totally off base here. I think it's valid to be at a position where, and I'm not saying that this person who wrote in is in this position of like, I don't want to, share my income or plan for their retirement. But ideally, if you're in a relationship with somebody long term, you want what's best for them, right? And ideally, there is that trust and that mutual support. So um, I get though that not everything's ideal, especially in the relationship space. And that's why you got to figure out what is your level of trust with this person? What is your level of commitment in terms of both financially and everything else? So, all right, I have to get going here soon, but I want to answer a little bit more. I want a couple more. I'm going to try and make these quicker answers, okay? Because I want to get through some of them. But this has made me realize I need to do more episodes on this because holy moly. Okay. So we had somebody comment and said, let's see here. Can you draft your own prenup or do you need an attorney to make it official? You definitely are going to want an attorney unless you yourself are an attorney. To make sure that it stands up in the court of law, you're going to want an attorney. Anything that like could go to court, whether that's being sued, whether that's going through a divorce, whether that's custody, Anything you can do to make sure that you are covered legally, especially because things differ so much state to state, you absolutely are going to want an attorney to make sure you're covered. And they're considering things you never considered. They are working on things that, wouldn't have the ability to do. Getting a template is not necessarily the answer either. So, yes, you're going to want to work with an attorney who knows the laws in your state. Okay, what's the next thing? Navigating different money mindset styles in a relationship. I'm assuming that means like saver spender kind of mindset. And it goes back again to navigating what is your dream life? What is the things that you both want? And crafting that dream life together. We're going to have to like do an entire episode on dream life, aren't we? So that we can get very clear. We can have like an online podcast workshop, because even your dream life as an individual is an important thing to establish. So it's like, you got to know what your dream life is, you got to know what your partner's dream life is, and then you got to know what your dream life together is. Because until you both have that thing that you're so excited about, how are you ever going to change your mindset around money? How are you ever going to change your behaviors? Behaviors are one of the hardest things to change. How are you going to do that if you're not excited about the potential, the reason why you're doing it? This question's a great question. Do you break up if your spending habits don't match, or is there another way around this? You don't have to break up, but you have to decide what is important to you. What kind of shit are you willing to put up with? Because if you have tried to have dream life conversation, if you have tried to get your partner on board in ways that we've already talked about, and you're getting nowhere, and the spending continues to be an issue, or the approaches to money continue to be an issue, you have to ask yourself, am I willing to just have completely separate finances from this person and to live in order to live together, or in order to like have a life together? Or am I not willing to do that? I certainly would not want to completely combine my finances with certain like spending behaviors. Like, for example, if somebody was a gambler, or if somebody just, refused to invest for their future, or refused to save an emergency fund, I would not want to partner with that person personally, just because that's who I am. And those are my priorities. And stability is a massive priority for me. But I would have to ask myself, am I okay not having a partner in that way? Because you would not have a financial partner then. You got to ask yourself, are you okay with that? And again, this is after trying to have these conversations, because the thing is, if they're willing to try and they are willing to do things, that's a different conversation. But if they are at this point in their life where they are not willing to do those things, and they are not willing to have these conversations, that speaks volumes. It speaks volumes in terms of how they value you. It speaks volumes on how their mindset is. And it also speaks volumes about their commitment to the relationship. So try to have those conversations first. If you're getting nowhere, then you have to ask yourself, is this the kind of shit I'm willing to put up with for the rest of my life? If the answer is yes, more power to you. But make sure you keep your finances separate, because you got to be careful. And now, obviously, I'm going to the extreme here. I was like, oh, spending habits misaligned, gambling. I get, I get that there are levels of gray, and maybe it's not that extreme. So you got to ask yourself, if this never changes, am I cool with that? If the answer is no, well, then you either have to stay in that relationship knowing that someday it's probably going to end, or you end it. Okay, best app to use that both couples can use for budgeting together, sharing goals. I'm very boring. I like using good old Google Sheet spreadsheets, and we have a free template in my guide, which is at moneyrightguide.com. You can grab that. There are some good questions to have as a couple as well. But the reason I like it is because a Google Sheet you guys can both access. You guys can both like enter, you can see real time. You don't have to connect your bank accounts or anything like that. I know Mint is good too in terms of like being able to connect and like see each other's spending. To be honest though, I don't know if you can do it in a joint. I believe you can do it in a joint way. You would just have to like share a login at the very least. But I haven't really liked apps specifically for learning money management, because it takes away the mindfulness of it all. If you're not learning how to track your money, if you're not paying attention to your money, then how are you ever going to be mindful enough to change your money? So that's why I really like the Google spreadsheet. I know it's boring. I know it's not sexy, but I have like a tutorial on how to use it, as well as the actual sheet itself, at moneyrightguide.com. Moneyrightguide.com. Okay, we are getting to the hour mark, but I want to answer one more question. Let's see here. Gosh, you guys really had a lot of the same questions, and it's specifically that income disparity. So I'm curious if you guys think that my opinion on income disparity is like, I do think in my relationship, I recognize that I'm going to have to put more money into the relationship. And I'm okay with that because I'm not willing to lower my standard of living in order to live a life where he could split everything with me. So you got to ask yourself what you want. But I do think splitting things based off of income makes a lot more sense. But you got to be willing to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, might need to ask yourself how willing you are to stay in that relationship. Again, hot take it or leave it. I'm so nervous because relationships, like having an opinion on people's relationships. I'm doing it off of a question box on Instagram. I don't actually have an opinion on your specific relationship because I don't know anything about you. So I need that to be very clear. Please don't break up because of this podcast episode. These are just my hot takes based off the information that you're giving me. So disclaimers, a new kind of disclaimer this time. And the other question that I wanted to address, and this is where we will end it, is how soon is it too soon to bring up money conversations in a relationship? So this is for my folks who are out there dating, who are like, when do we talk about this? Like, when is this important? And I will say I'm a little extreme. I like talking about this stuff and did talk about this stuff on first dates. I liked talking about money because obviously, I am a content creator. I am a financial educator. I am somebody who lives and breathes money. So, whoever is going to be with me has to be comfortable with that and has to know, like, that's my passion. And I'm going to ask questions that other people might think are inappropriate. Like, not that long ago, I don't remember what we were talking about. It was me, my brother, and his fiance. And then my dad was like standing nearby. He wasn't like listening in on the conversation, but could hear the conversation. And I just looked at Max. Max had like talked about Max as my brother. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I should be getting a raise this year." And I go, "Oh, great. How much money are you making?" And like to me, and he didn't blink an eye. He knows that like this is the type of questions I ask. And I do think millennials were a lot more open to it. And he just like spit it out. And I was like, hell yeah, that's so exciting. I'm so excited for you. And then his fiance said, like, yeah, my raise was only like 50 cents. And I was like, what? I was like, what is your hourly wage? And she told me too, because obviously they know this is my thing, but I like seeing the pattern of people talking about their money more transparently and more often. But what if you're not comfortable talking about it on the first date? And when I say I'm comfortable talking about it on the first date, it's not like, what's your net worth? It's not like, how much do you make? It's not those kind of questions. It's more testing the water conversations. It's more like, what are you interested in? Well, I really love personal finance. Like, I'm obsessed with it. I invest in index funds. I'm kind of pursuing early retirement and I'm kind of obsessed with like making as much money as humanly possible. Like, those are the kind of things that I would talk about. And, in a much more casual way, kind of just to get their reaction. So I'm sharing about myself. I'm not necessarily asking about them, but I might say, like, what about you? Or like, do you care about finance at all? Are you into personal finance? Like, do you track your money? Do you have an emergency fund? Whatever. But I try to do it in a way that's not prying into their like boundaries or anything like that. But at the same time, I have to trust that person is willing to show me where those boundaries are because my boundaries around money are very different than potentially other people's boundaries around money because this is what I do for a living. I am like so numb to these questions that they are second nature to me. So for me, I would ask those sort of things or at least talk about those sort of things on a first date. But in terms of like asking questions or discussing things that could be related to your future, like, so what's your belief on emergency funds? Or, what kind of emergency fund do you have? Or are you saving for anything right now? Or, what are you doing for retirement? What's your preferred investing style? I think that's right before you decide to buy in. Like, those are questions you've got to ask, in my opinion, before you get in too deep. Because if the person's answer is immediately, oh, I just use credit cards, or I don't believe in debt, or, oh, yeah, I have student loans, I just don't pay them. Like, not in a forbearance kind of way, like more like I have debt and I don't pay that debt. Those I think are things that you need to know before you decide to seriously date somebody, before you decide to buy in essentially. And whenever that happens for you, that's going to be different for everyone's time frame. Maybe it's 3 months in, maybe it's 6 dates in. It just depends on the pace of your relationship. And I think you're going to know when it feels right to have those conversations. But I think with everything between two people, whether romantic or not, I think the conversation starts with vulnerability. I think it starts with saying, hey, one of the things that's really important to me is money, like is personal finance, is having control over those sort of things and being smart with that because to me that's security, it's freedom, it's options. And one of the things I'm looking for in a partner long term is somebody who is at least willing to learn that, if not already there, if not already doing things to secure their own future. I'm not expecting you to be at, Clo Bear status where it's like, I have you're an emergency fund. I, know every little thing, but to have some level of interest and to be open to it, I think is the key. And granted, it depends on where you're at in your life. If you're in your 20s dating and somebody's like, I don't know. Like, I'm just figuring it out as I go. Seeing their reaction is going to be telling enough. They may become very defensive or they may become scared or they may just, make a joke and be like, "Yeah, I have no idea." That's going to be telling in terms of like their openness. But I think that if you get to your late 30s, your early 40s, your 50s and you're dating and you're seeing red flags like, "Oh, I don't pay attention to that stuff," or, "Oh, I don't care. I'll just use my emergency card or my credit cards." Like, whatever, that's going to be a little bit more telling than the 20-year-old saying like, "Oh, I don't know, I'll figure it out." So you really got to pay attention to the way people respond to things and their level of openness about the things that are important to you. Because if they like you, if they want to continue to have a relationship with you, if they see a future, if they respect you, their reaction should reflect that. It shouldn't be dismissive. It shouldn't say, "Oh, are you a gold digger? Oh, you want to know?" I remember when I went out with a terrible human being who had lied to me the entire time we were together. It was a very brief relationship, but like 2 weeks into the relationship, he was requesting that we be exclusive. And it was during the pandemic. So I was like, sure, I'm not dating anyone else anyway. And he asked me a couple times to be exclusive. And turns out he was screwing around with half of Chicago at the time. And he was like 10 years older than me, too. So he's like doing fuckboy shit at the age of 40. So many warning signs, guy. I swear I'm smarter now, but also he was a good liar. But anyway, I remember when I finally had that conversation with him about money, where I was like, I think my question was, and granted, we had hung out many times. This was probably like the fifth or sixth time that we had hung out. And I said, "So, do you have an emergency fund? Like, what's your plans for emergencies? Or, like, what's your plan for retirement? How are you currently investing?" And his reaction told me a lot about him. And he immediately asked if I was a gold digger, which is funny because my net worth, even at that time, was probably significantly higher. I certainly was making more money than he was at the time. And he just kind of was dismissive and said, "Oh, that's what credit cards are for. I've got a secure job. I don't have to worry about that." And I just remember feeling like, "Oh, Chloe, that's a red flag." Like, it's not necessarily a red flag that, he's not into finance, but it's a red flag that he's being so dismissive of what you have said is important to you. But I was dumber then, guys. I was dumber. I didn't value myself the way that I value myself now. So, anyway, holy moly, guys, this was a really interesting episode. I really enjoyed this. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did enjoy it, let me know because I will do another one because I have so many more questions. Granted, a lot of them are similar. So I'm going to need you guys to guide me on this. If this is something or types of stuff you want to see again, we'll do it again in the future. But this was fun for me. I enjoyed it. So I love you guys. Thank you for participating. I hope nobody broke up after this unless you really needed to break up. Please note, disclaimer here, I am not a therapist or a relationship coach or any type of anything. Like, I'm just a lady on the internet who knows a lot about money and likes to educate people on it. So, all right. Love you all, and I will talk to you later. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Money Bear podcast. If you've made it this far, do us a favor, take 2 seconds, rate, review, and subscribe. It seriously means the world to me. And if you just take a sec to do that, I will appreciate you endlessly. And if you do, let me know on Instagram and I'll thank you personally. So, got that. And of course, since we were talking about anything financial on this show, please note that nothing on this show is intended as financial advice. I don't know you, unfortunately. And because of that, I cannot tell you what to do with your money. You got to work with a financial professional who knows your situation, who is preferably a fiduciary. And keep in mind that everything that we talk about on this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It's all my opinion. So, there's that. If you want to see our full terms and conditions, head on over to the show notes. And while you're there, we've got free resources for you to get started on your money journey down in the show notes as well, including a free guide to help you with your budgeting templates and budgeting tutorials and investing 101, understanding the different accounts that are out there. All that good stuff is inside of my free guide, which is also available at thelazyinvestorscourse.com/guide. And if you're ready to take our relationship to the next level, I am also hosting a monthly investing class. And that investing class, you can find the times we're offering it this month at thelazyinvestorscourse.com/webinar. That link is in the show notes as well. And that's where you have the chance to meet me live and ask those money questions live. It's a good time. We've had over 20,000 people as of recording this join or register. And yeah, it's always nice to meet you guys. So I hope to see you there. Again, all that is available down in the show notes. So thank you again for coming and listening. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next week.